4 differences between a 6% and a 60% margin accounting firm. But really, it's as simple as this. Take a $300 project. At a 6% margin, we've got $282 in costs. To get to a 60% margin, we need to charge $705 for that same work. But how do you do that? I'm gonna tell you how. Now, this episode is heavily inspired from a recent podcast I did about how to 2x your prices. Recommend you check that one out after this if you haven't. Can I help you? There's a new referral on line 2. Says he's a friend of Steve's. Oh, okay. Does crypto mining in the Bahamas. Says it's tricky because he's a minister. We don't have any of those. But it seems like a good opportunity. He said it was line 2. Most firms still struggle with finding a very specific problem to solve for a very specific type of person. And the result is we are all lumped into this mixing pot that looks the same as every other accountant in town. And as a result, customers are gonna compare your prices to everyone else because outwardly, you're the same as everyone else. I've used this analogy before, but if you're just generally serving like, quote, small businesses and you charge, say, $500 for a thing, greater specificity enables greater price. So the same $500 thing, if it's for creative agencies, now it can be a $1,000 thing. And this feels wrong. This feels like highway robbery. I'm doing the same work. But when something feels specific to them, whether it's different or not, the perceived value changes. Now you're the only one in town with messaging specific to creative agencies, right? But you can do even better. How about a creative agency that generates over $1 million a year? Maybe you didn't want the smaller ones anyway, so let's add it to your messaging. And now we're charging $1,500 for that thing that was $500. Now, the reason we don't do this is because we're afraid about closing the door on everything else. If we get this specific, we'll attract less, when the reality is your generic messaging meant to attract everyone, it's actually attracting no one and does nothing to drive pricing. Remember, an increase to price goes straight to the bottom line. If you're operating at a 50% margin on a $500 project, so $250 in costs, the same project at $1,500 yields 6 times the profit. 6, meaning you can trade one $1,500 project for 6 $500 projects, a sixth of the work, and you make the same money. But how much time today are you investing in finding a better client right now? Or are you focused on, I don't know, technical training, workflow? I know, it hurts. And marketing isn't something that most of us ever set out to do or even particularly enjoy. But finding a more specific customer is the biggest driver of your pricing. Somebody's here and wants to meet with you. Like a new client? I think so. Did they go through the intake process? They thought this was the DMV. Okay. But when I told him what we do, he said he doesn't think he has a tax return. So he wasn't coming for a tax return. His driver's license expired. Did you see what kind of car he drove? It was a bike. Actually an e-bike. An e-bike? Ooh. And he wants to meet with me? I let him charge his bike, so he's got about 20 minutes to kill. I'll be right out. How do clients come to you today? Have they already done any research? Are they excited to meet you? Were they clamoring to schedule an appointment, or did they just kind of stumble through the door begrudgingly? For most of us, it's the latter. We do a thing they don't want to do themselves, and frankly, it's kind of a chore just to find an accountant to do it for you. But there is a better way, because when you take a client in a begrudging state, they usually aren't excited to pay top dollar for what you do. And you may very well dazzle them down the road, but the expectation for what you cost has already been set. And the bummer is, it's set when they usually know nothing about how good you are. But the better approach is to find a way to pre-dazzle them. Have them come in a state where they couldn't possibly imagine working with anybody else. And specificity helps with this. If you're the only person they found that works with creative agencies over $1 million, that's a great start, but we can do even more. 2 examples of how to achieve this among many. 1, let's say they've seen you on social media, on a podcast, an interview with someone they respect, or maybe even on their own podcast. This enables this sort of parasocial relationship where they know you, but you don't know them. and it gives you much more of an advantage in the sales process and control over how you set your pricing. A second example, you do a trial project with them that blows them off their socks. We did a whole video around this. The notion of first selling a solution to a problem they have, a one-off project, could be, I don't know, tech stack review, a one-off tax plan, an accounting review. Whatever it is, stand it up as a standalone project that solves a painful problem for them. Then when they have a fantastic experience, when they come to you for ongoing work, they can't imagine working with anybody else, right? And frankly, will probably pay 50% more than they would have been willing to pay before. And you now start that ongoing client engagement with a vastly different pricing expectation than you did before.
Dr. Steve said he didn't pay our bill because he never has time to pay bills and doesn't have the staff to do it.
Dr. Steve pays all of his bills himself? And his staff can't do it?
I think he doesn't want them seeing the bills.
So he needs help paying his bills.
Uh,
And his staff can't do it. And we already do their accounting. And we already get all the bills for the accounting.
uh-huh.
I don't know. Tell him to figure it out.
As you wish.
You've seen 100 examples of this in the wild. The financial advisor never being on the same page as the tax preparer. Should we be thinking about wealth management? Maybe your client can't find a bookkeeper that knows how to post the very nuanced stuff that they do. Should we be thinking about bookkeeping? Maybe they have this financially sensitive aspect of their business. It's hard to delegate to their team. Could we be that independent third-party solution? And the more specific your client is, the more specific the pains are that they share. But oftentimes, the best accounting firms are the ones with killer solutions that have nothing to do with accounting. Ultimately, we're in the business of solving pains for these entrepreneurs. And while we can certainly solve accounting and tax pains, and that may be what gets them in the door, there's probably a whole lot more you can do for them that they would happily rather pay you to do than another advisor or a new staff person. And the beauty here is when it comes to things like bookkeeping, where there's a bit of an expectation of what the cost of that would be. Work that is instead extremely specific to them, like it solves a pain point that's specific to them, that there aren't great solutions for, you can charge top dollar for that stuff because there is no agreed upon price for what that should be. I always kept an eye out for these pain points because they were tremendous opportunities to offer something I could charge really well for that also served as one more differentiator for my firm. It was great validation that we truly are a unique solution for a certain type of entrepreneur, and these were oftentimes our most profitable service lines.
We still need to figure out Steve's renewal.
Okay.
So we did that tax planning thing that saved him about $250,000 he wasn't expecting. We did that bill pay thing. He talked him out of hiring the $80,000 a year controller. That's going pretty well.
That was good, wasn't it?
He was able to get off the blood thinners.
I don't want to take credit for everything.
I don't know if you saw last time he was in. He was glowing.
Wasn't he?
So last year we charged him $1,200. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking we go big.
Let's go big.
The tax savings,
Huge.
not hiring the controller.
And the thinners,
What was the inflation bump we did this year?
1%.
Double it.
Doubled the price?
Double the inflation bump.
Doubled 2%?
2%. Yep.
Got it. 2%.
2%. We get so fixated on what stuff normally costs, on what somebody paid last year. That tax pricing survey you just saw that was shocking. When that's not how real people actually buy things. All that, what's the norm? It's inside baseball.
Like Pete Rose.
But your clients, they buy things according to the value that they assign to them. If I save somebody $100,000 in tax that they weren't expecting, you don't charge them your hourly rate. If you step in when a member of your client's staff leaves and take over that work, your pricing ought to look more like the cost of that person to the client than the cost to you to do the work. When a client would otherwise have to go hire a super experienced person like a CFO or a controller, your price to solve this problem ought to look more like the replacement cost of that experienced person than whatever it was you just saw in that accounting professional fee survey. Now, there's a lot of stigma and debate around, quote, value pricing, but just be mindful of the fact that your customer doesn't know that inside baseball that we do. They're gonna be paying according to how painful that problem is to them. Now, a lot of us aren't investing the time in finding the better customer because we are so bloody busy and staffing like it's just hard. But the best thing I ever did on the staffing front, and this is the truth, opened my firm up to hiring internationally. And this week's sponsor, Cloud Accountant Staffing, is gonna make that so easy for you. Roll the music! Here's the thing, Cloud Accountant Staffing was started by a firm owner that began hiring in the Philippines, realized these people are incredible. Same realization I had, honestly. They're so good. And eventually they had a killer talent pipeline that they could begin offering this stuff to other firms. It was as simple as that. Now, there's a bunch of different ways offshore staffing groups work, but Cloud Accountant Staffing specifically pre-screens folks who will be great fits for you, and they come to work for you 40 hours a week, Monday through Friday, even on your time zone if that's something you prefer. Easy as that, natural extension of your team that is genuinely capable of anything your onshore team can do. Now, most folks won't put them into client-facing capacities in their firms, but if I told you I had a sustainable solution for developing a super talented team of folks who could do the work, get the work done, buddy, I would be all over that. And I was all over that. I hired a ton of folks in the Philippines. Now, I know it is actually like really scary getting started. You're gonna have 100 questions. I would encourage you to have a chat with them just to learn more. You'll find the link in the video description. Because if you don't have time to find better customers, something's gonna give, and it is probably gonna be you. You will break. So there you go, 4 ideas to make your firm more profitable. Note, none of these things were workflow. They just weren't. They weren't software, but we're technical. We love talking workflow because it's a whole lot more attractive than marketing. Than attracting a better client, than dumping some bad fit clients. But the solution to most of your firm's problems can be boiled down to being able to make more money from doing less work. Hot take, I know. Now for a deeper dive on this, check out the episode on my podcast that I did about like a really constructive exercise to think through how can we charge double what we do today, largely doing the same work. This is an exercise you can do by yourself with your team. I'll put that little guy right up here. I suggest you check it out. Unless you're watching this on social, in which case it is not up there, it is now, honestly, who knows? It's probably buried in the comments somewhere. If it's on Twitter, I may have done another tweet, but that makes it less likely you'll see the first tweet. Social's just hard right now, you know?